Don't hear it.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening if you're joining from Switzerland. On behalf of the Embassy of Switzerland in the United States, I want to welcome you to the Swiss Film Club. And I should say this is our final edition of 2021. So it's been a great year watching with you all, and I think this is just a fantastic film to finish the year. My name is Emily Buss, and I work in public diplomacy at the Embassy. And this film club was started during this time when we're trying to create moments of shared viewership, even if virtually, and to continue introducing our audiences to great Swiss productions and the work of Swiss artists like these two we have here with us today. And this film, Eden for Everyone, tells the story of Nelly and her extended family, including her grandmother, Rosemary, who has dementia, and it's set against the backdrop of their community garden, of their family garden. And they've been involved in this garden for many years, and we see all the politics and family drama associated with it. But this film had its premiere at the Zurich Film Festival in 2020 in the fall, and was also shown at the Solothurn Film Festival, which was virtual earlier in 2021 in January. And I'm proud to say this is its North American premiere, and the first time it's being shown with English subtitles. But I will also say I hope we can do this in person at some point, have a screening, maybe in a community garden here in Washington. That would be great. But I'm very happy to be joined for this discussion today by the film's cinematographer, Mr. Elia Lyssy, and its star, Steffi Friis, who plays Nelly. I'll try to introduce them, though they have very impressive CVs. Elia Lyssy has been working behind the camera as a cinematographer for over 20 years. He's worked on 6 continents in a variety of formats, including full-length, narrative and documentary film, short film, television, among others. He is originally from Switzerland, but is now based in New York. And Ms. Steffi Friis is originally from Solothurn in Switzerland, home of the film festival. She earned her bachelor's degree at the University of Arts in Bern, and she has appeared on stage in a number of productions in Basel, and previously appeared in films such as The Divine Order and The Last Point. And Nelly in Eden for Everyone is her first lead role, so congratulations.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing from you viewers as well. So if you're watching in Crowdcast and you have any questions, feel free to write in the chat or use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the page, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But that being said, Steffi and Elia, thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing from you. So let's get started. My first question, Elia, is for you. Your father, Rolf Lyssy, directed the film, which was based on a documentary, I believe. And so I'm hoping you can speak a bit about the inspiration and the process for creating the film, at what point you got involved, and how you approached shooting the film.
Okay. First off, I'd like to say thank you for having me, for having us. You know, one way for me also to see Steffi again, which is great. And thank you for everybody who's on here, who's watched the film, and thank you for watching the film. This film was actually, it's the second narrative film I've done with my father. The first one was the Letzte Pointe, or I don't know what the English version would be, because pointe is a little different connotation, which we did in 2016. With the same co-writer or writer of the film, Dominique Bernet, who also wrote this film. And like you said, this film was inspired by a documentary by Manu Khalil called Unser Garten Eden, Our Garden Eden, which is a great documentary about a community garden in, I think it's Canton Bern, and just the people there. And so that was the inspiration. And the producer brought that to the attention of the Swiss television. And television, the head of television or the drama department asked Dominic to write the script, to write basically a script, a dramatic or comedy script based on that documentary, because that's two different things. The documentary is inspiration. This film is not like the documentary, just based on the idea of a community garden and some of the people. So Dominic wrote that and approached my father because they had worked together in the Let's Puente, and asked, "Hey, would you be interested in directing this?" And this was the first. It was supposed to be a TV movie, and not only a TV movie. It was basically the last TV movie that Swiss television decided to make. Now they are only making series. There's no more TV movies. They used to do 2 movies a year, but that was the last one. And my father had never done a movie for TV. All his films were for the cinema. So he was like, okay, yeah, why not? And they worked together on the script. Um, and then that's how it came about. I got involved basically. My father called me after he got the call from Dominic, and they said that they're going to do this, and said, "Hey, I want you to, shoot this, and let's start." And I was like, "Okay." And I was a little bit involved in the, not co-writing, but like as the versions of the script would go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. I was involved there, and then we started. It was a TV schedule, so we were supposed to have 25 shooting days, which then got cut down to 22 shooting days. So we did the movie in 22 days.
Wow.
Which was rather nerve-wracking and people saw the movie, it's a lot of exteriors. And of course, with the exteriors, you depend on the weather. And we were very, very, very lucky. We had one day where there was some drizzle and kind of came and went. You cannot see it in the film because we kind of tried to shoot it so you can't see it. Had it rained and had we lost the day, I don't know where we would have picked it up, because also of the schedules of actors. We couldn't push, we couldn't move. It was very tight. But we managed to do it. And when the television people saw the film, they were like, you know what? We really like it. And if you find a distributor, we'll go to the theaters with that before we screen on TV. And
Wow.
that's how it came to be a cinema movie.
Fantastic. Yeah, I didn't even think about that you were reliant on having the most beautiful stretch of weather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Steffi, I'm curious to hear about when you became involved in the film, what attracted you to the role of Nellie, and any specific preparation you did.
Well, I got involved in April 2019. That was when my audition was. And well, it was very special because when I read the script for the audition, I immediately felt like I know this character. I felt very connected to her. I totally recognized her within myself. And so that was definitely one thing that really attracted me to it. Plus, I thought it was very interesting because she is actually not a funny character. It's a comedy, but she's not a funny character. She's not a fun person. She has a very sad core, and she has a lot to deal with in life, which is absolutely not funny. And I was very attracted to the idea how to build a character upon that within a comedy context. So I sort of built her layer by layer, with the sad or tragic or dramatic core, up to the surface where she has a very, very thick line of humor, toughness, and sarcasm, which she uses to sort of dial down everything that's really going on with her, which is not funny. And I thought that was funny because she uses that humor very precisely. So I loved the idea to play that. And also working with Rolf Lyssy was a very great opportunity because he's been making movie for over 50 years. So we don't have a lot of people around here who can actually say that. And he did it with great success and still does. So that was really, really great for me to have a chance to do my first leading role with such a great director.
Right. Yeah, I like that she uses that sarcasm as sort of a defense mechanism, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I feel like a lot of us do that.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so for both of you, can you talk a bit more about the process of filming? I know, Steffi, you said you did your audition in April, but what was casting like? How long did it take to film? Well, actually, you addressed that already, but like how long was the process in terms of editing? And also, I'm curious to know if this garden that you filmed in, if it really exists.
It does. It does exist. It's real. You can see it at the end of the movie when the drone pulls up, and you can see it, and it's incredible. It's huge, and it's in the middle of the city. I wasn't aware that there was something there was such a huge garden in the middle of the city of Zurich. So yeah, that's a real place, and we didn't build anything. That's all original.
Wow.
Yeah, and we were lucky because of the weather.
we did. I mean, obviously, we went for. We saw a few of those community gardens. They're all over Zurich. This being probably one of the largest ones, if not the largest one. But we saw a few, and it was hard because we like the houses in this one, but it's next to an airport, so we have planes all the time, so that's not conducive to work. We like the views of this one, but it's too small. So we finally found the one that we filmed in, and like Steffi said, at the end of the film, you see where it is. And so when we went, we looked around to find. We had to have the constellation of the houses, where Paulo Cesar's house had to be next to Rosemary's house, and then the aunt has to be close by. So we had to kind of find the right houses. And what stuck out, of course, was Paulo Cesar, the blue one. That was the only blue house in the whole garden. And we were like, this is pretty cool. And the one that has ended up being Rosemary's house was actually the house of the actual garden president, because they do have a president in the garden.
Yeah.
And we learned, at least me, I learned a lot about these community gardens because, like you said, I live in, it's been now 33 years that I'm in New York. So I left Switzerland in 1988. And of course I go back and forth, but I've been here. And I've never really been in a community garden. And so then we got immersed. But it was a real one. And not only was it a real one, but it was a working one. So people, these are real tomatoes. These are real, things. So which meant for us, we knew that from the get-go, no dollies. We can't put dolly tracks down in the gardens. Like we can't destroy these things because it also was the end of summer. So, people were harvesting, people were getting their things. So we had to be very careful, which was also a challenge because, you have a film crew, and the film crew usually is a whole machine. And we all had to walk on the little, paved stands through the gardens and carry the stands. And that was one of the reasons also why we decided, for example, that a lot of things have to be shot handheld. And with so that we were able to move quickly, rather than, like, for example, the Let's de Puente, the last film we did, where it was more classical, with dolly shots, like, slower. This one had to be we had to be mobile.
There are a lot of rules in these gardens.
Yeah.
A lot of rules.
There's actually no bicycles or dollies.
No.
It's actually a good transition to another of my questions, which is about gardens. And I'll say at the embassy, we talk a lot about sustainability and biodiversity, and we have our own garden on the embassy grounds and the residence grounds that we're converting to be more biodiverse, and we have beehives and everything. So I think I thought about that a lot when watching this film set against the backdrop of the community garden. And so, and maybe Steffi, you can speak more to this, but about the role of these sorts of gardens in Switzerland, and is what we see here sort of a typical representation of how you would see Swiss people using and enjoying their gardens and that community?
Well, I'm not a part of that community, so I'm also speaking as an outsider. But I know a couple of people who actually they are part of a community in these gardens, and they grow their own food, and they're very happy to go there to relax and sort of calm down from working, and they've made friends there and everything. So I think it's quite a big thing, actually. And I heard that it's a very typical Swiss thing. I wasn't aware of that before the movie because I was never part of that world, so I had no idea. But apparently it's a big thing, and that's why there are so many. And since we shot that movie, I've grown aware of how many there are. When I ride on the train through the country, which is, well, a very short ride in this country, you see so many of them next to the tracks. There are so many everywhere. So yeah, I think it's very popular.
And it was, like I said, it's a working garden. So for example, the houses that we used were people that gave us those houses for the duration, but they also knew we had to tell them, okay, we're not here for 4 weeks. We're in your house, we're going to be there on the 10th and on the 18th, and so in between they were doing their gardening and everything. Sometimes they would come at the end of the day when they knew we were finishing because it get dark. And they were like, oh yeah, so like we brought some new fresh earth that we're tomorrow morning, because you guys are not at our house, we're going to start doing this, putting in the I don't know, these flowers, or moving this over there. And so we kind of, sometimes they would come when we were packing up, they would come and do some grilling with some friends, like in the garden. And I thought, wow, this is a really, really cool thing to have a little garden house and grow your tomatoes and, potatoes and whatever that you can then just pick and eat. But supposedly it's not that easy to get a spot in one of those gardens, because you have a plot of, it comes with a little hut in the plot, and there's so many, and once people are there, they enjoy them, you can be put on a list, and then if somebody retires or wants to give it up, but it's not easy to get a garden plot.
Yeah.
Wow. And I know, yeah, in the US, it seems like we have, especially, in cities like Washington, we have a lot of community gardens where people do go and grow their own vegetables. But what I think we don't have here is the community element with the houses and gatherings there. So it was very interesting to see. And so the film also addresses, I think, a lot of deeper contemporary issues, migration, multiculturalism, dementia, family issues, and of course we see the political clashes at the very, very local level. And, of course, some of it is used as satire, but how do you think the film balances addressing these heavier topics with the sort of general lighter comedic feel? And is that maybe a better way to address it sometimes?
I'm very shy to answer that question, but actually, I feel like we've only touched the surface of these topics, because my opinion is when you really go into the depth of these topics, it's not very funny. So we try to keep it light. We try to really just touch the surface and take the comedic aspect of it, instead of going into the depth with these topics. Except for the dementia, I think, because you can really see how it slowly gets worse. In the end, she doesn't recognize most of the people anymore. She doesn't really know who is who anymore. So I think that was that was one topic where we actually went into the depth with it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Steffi. You know, what my father always says, that what interests him the most, and if you look at his films, you know, that's the kind of, you know, that's the thing with Swiss Makers or Teddy Bear or any of his films, is the intersection between tragedy and
Yeah.
comedy, where they meet. That's where the interesting thing becomes. You know, it's the old actor's emblem. You know, like the laughing face and the crying face. You know, like, I mean, the duality of that, it's always together, right? And we, you know, there's a lot of points in there, and especially in these times now, when people start to, you know, they talk about wokeness and everything, where, you know, the depiction of certain groups, of ethnic groups, that, you know, it's time to really address these things and not just use these stereotypes and blah 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 blah, which is great. Which of course, in our case, which is the case in a community garden, interesting enough, if you drive, like Steffi says, you drive on the train or you walk in community gardens, you will see everybody has their flag. The
Yeah.
flag poles in these gardens, where, you know, you see the Italian flag, the Portuguese flag, that is something where people go there. And yes, they're in Switzerland. They're not trying to be like, this is Portugal, but they are of Portuguese descent, or they're Portuguese that came, you know, at one point into Switzerland, and they just display that, as they're proud to be that, you know. Um, so you have these different cultures, you know, they also bring their way of growing things that comes from their heritage, and so, you know, so forth. So it's a diversity, you know, the same as the plant diversity or the vegetable diversity. You have ethnic diversities in these gardens, and we thought, based on that documentary as well, that's really interesting. That is a great situation that can, where you can find conflicts, you know, um, situations that you can, that are interesting, you know. Um, could someone say, well, you know, it's a little superficial or you know, a lot of stuff is on the surface? Absolutely. We're talking not about a series, but about a 90-minute film. So we had to kind of pick and choose, or even just kind of, what I hope this film does is kickstart something, you know.
Mm.
That's why, for example, in the subtitles, we decided to, when the Kosovar is talking, you see that there's no subtitles. Also, in the original version, they were not subtitled in Swiss or in German. So basically, unless you speak Kosovar, um, or you speak Kurdish, or, you will not understand. Is that because we want to make them different? No, we wanted to, you know, that's the reality. Like,
Yeah.
they do speak with each other in these, you know, sometimes very funny accents and broken, you know, but they do communicate, but they also have their own language, you know. So we were trying to, you know, uh, stay true to that too. Sometimes, yes, you can't understand each other perfectly, but that doesn't mean you can't get along, or you can't make an effort, or you can't be civil with each other, you know. And, you know, I've heard the uh, criticism, for example, in the meeting, where there's the issue because, you know, the Fatih says that it's not cool because Steffi, or, you know, Nelly broke her promise because he can't make his lamb because there's a pig on the grill. One could say, like, oh, you're making fun of Muslims and them being halal. No, not at all. When she says, that is a concern, you know, and that's not taken away that, oh, he shouldn't be so difficult. No, he's upset, and the other guy is like, doesn't want to see it. I mean, these are conflicts that we have every day. You know, we've seen them in talks about, you know, on political things. Should there be mosques? Should there be, you know, there are different aspects of different cultures, and they're valid. But can we somehow find a solution rather than first start shooting at each other, you know? And in that scene, when the father then says, okay, well, how about I'll do this, you know? And then everybody's like, okay. And in the end, they're grilling together. So
And we're
the hope is, yes, is it a little simple, so to speak? Is it a little yes, of course, it's a movie. It's for 90 minutes, but it should be maybe a Kickstarter for people to go, like Nelly says in that thing, come on, I mean, can't we just get along, especially in a garden called Eden, right? Which we all know what that's a reference to, paradise. We should be able to just make that effort. And it's always a give and take. So maybe sometimes you got to give a little and then you can take a little. And that, I think, is the idea behind this,
Yeah. Very well said. Thank you.
Yes. No, that's great, and I agree. And we had spoken a bit, Elia, earlier about the translations and the subtitling. And again, this was the first time it's shown with English subtitles. And I think there are moments where some of the finesse, as you said, of the accents or the dialects or the jokes might sort of get lost in translation. So I'm interested to hear what the audience thought about that as well. But
me actually too. I mean, whoever's on here, and I see there's some people, I would love to hear from them, because they are, of course, like I love Kurosawa movies, but I don't speak Japanese, so I know that I read subtitles, and I'm sure, no, not I'm sure, I know for a fact that I lose certain nuances. But I would love to hear, hopefully we can hear from some people how they, viewed that film.
Yeah. And so, sort of speaking again of translation, cultural and otherwise, Elia, you have spent a lot of your career working in the U.S. and around the world, and so I'm wondering, just from your personal perspective, culturally, are there aspects of this story that you think might particularly seem familiar to U.S. audiences or won't resonate at all?
I subscribe to, I've done, a lot of documentaries, which means, I've been able to, through movies and through documentaries, to go twice around the world and to go into all these different kinds of communities that I would have never had access to unless I would be part of it. By the way, also this, community garden. And so the older I get and the more I've seen, and the less and less I subscribe to, the Americans or the Europeans or the Swiss, we're human beings. And diversity, if there's one country that is built on, diversity, and I'm in New York, it's, the US. And so, yes, of course, the issue of diversity and of different ethnic groups or so I would think would be of interest to somebody here, whether they're Americans or whatever, it doesn't matter. It should be of interest to anybody. We live in a global community now, and this global community, we can read it in the news every day. There's a lot of issues. People don't talk with each other, especially here in the US. We've entered a period where the chasm between people, between whether it's political groups, Republicans, Democrats, has been widening and widening, and there's less and less dialogue. You're either here or you're here. You're either Swiss or you're not. You're either this or you're that. And we should have more, again, like Nelly says, more together and less against each other. And I think for the American audience, it might be interesting to, again, hear from some of the people that are here, that they were maybe, that's what I like sometimes when I see a film from, whether it's an Indian film or Chinese film, it's exotic for me because it's a different, people look different, people speak different, things look different. And so right there, I'm like, ooh, that piques my interest. And then when you look past the different looks or the different cars or clothes, when it comes to human connection, then it's kind of, an American understands that as well as a Swiss or an Italian or an Irishman or a Chinese person, because it's human. So I'm curious to see, if dementia, is not a Swiss disease or disease, illness. It's international.
Again, very well said. And yes, please do. If, the film is available through next week. So still, as you watch it, please send us your feedback because we're very interested to hear. And I'll also remind you, we're almost at the end of our discussion. So if you do have any questions and you're watching on Crowdcast, feel free to go ahead and ask them by using the Ask a Question button. So Steffi, question for you. This was your first leading role in a film, as we said. And just broadly, what was the experience like for you? And were there certain things you feel like from this set that you'll be able to take forward with you into the rest of your career?
Definitely. Yes, absolutely. Well, it was an incredible experience because it was the first time I got the opportunity to actually come to a set every day instead of one day and then 2 weeks later I'll come back and 2 weeks later I'll come back and then I'm gone. That was the first time I did that. So I was very nervous about that because I've never done it before. But I learned something I was worried about was that I'd go home every night and think, I should have done it differently, or I want to go back and do it again. And that's simply not possible because of the time, because we didn't have any. So I learned to, when I shot a scene, just let it go, move on, next. And that is something I think is very important to be able to do in this job, because you can drive yourself insane by criticizing yourself and regretting things and wanting to be better and all that. Sometimes you just have to learn it's done, it's over, let's move on. So I learned that because I did it every day. So that was great. And I got to say, we had an incredible crew. Everybody worked very, very hard and very focused. And we had a great atmosphere on set. I felt like everybody got along, and it was a very nice work environment for me. I could really concentrate on my own stuff, but I still acknowledged everything around me. And that was, I think, a big bonus that we had such a great crew. So I hope in the future that I'll have more of that.
Great. And we do have one question from the audience, actually, about Nellie's occupation as a bus driver and the broader thematic impact of that about inclusion, or is it just about, the sacrifices that she's making in her life at this point in time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, she does that because she wants to be a veterinarian, but she decided to take care of her grandmother. So she took the full responsibility for her. And that's why she's driving a bus, so she can keep an eye on her all the time, so she doesn't wander off. And now I'm not sure, did I answer the question or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about, she's making sacrifices at this point, putting a break in her schooling and
yeah, that's incredible. She's so selfless. Mm-hmm. That's also something I respect so much about her, because it's also interesting because the story, she's the leading character, and yet her particular story doesn't really get told fully, but she sort of leads through the story that is happening around her. And I think that's a very interesting aspect about the character as well, because she makes sacrifices. I mean, she doesn't want to become president of this garden community. She doesn't. She just, her uncle sort of just thinks, okay, let's get rid of the other dude, so you do it, because you can do it. And she doesn't really want to, but she does it anyway. So she puts a lot of her shoulders that isn't really her choice or her first choice. And she's incredible. And I was always thinking that her life sort of goes on without me. I always hope that someday she will also just focus on the things she really wants in life and discover things that she needs for herself, instead of just making one sacrifice after the other, because she's very good at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I loved how hard she always fought for her grandmother. She has an awareness of the situation, obviously, and it's almost a growth on her part by the end to acknowledge what actually is maybe the best thing for her grandmother to do. But in the beginning, how she's fighting for her and saying, oh, it's just she just thinks she's this or just that, and sort of buying into the reality that her grandmother is living, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, she's really adapting to her reality, and that's amazing. And at this point, I got to say, I thought it was very amazing how Heidi Digelman played that dementia. I think it was really an incredible performance by her. So that was amazing to watch her. Just side note.
Fantastic. Well, we have maybe sort of already touched on this a little bit in terms of starting conversations and approaching sort of at the surface level the issues that the film brings up. But if there is one thing you hope that audiences take away from this film, what is it? No pressure.
Well, I think it was. I think the thing that Elia said before about that it kickstarts people into, getting into a conversation and sort of that I think that's something I hope that this film can kickstart, the conversation between people.
Yeah, and what I love, and I mean, okay, it may be a spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler because we end, like somebody, because I just saw something I can't wait to watch tonight. But I think, Marina, you will still enjoy the film. But I think at the end, when we see where this garden is, and you see it's next to the cemetery, you see there's a cemetery there, and it's in the middle of the city, and it's there's houses everywhere, whereas through the film you saw it's green, it's nature, it's all these different people of ethnic backgrounds that have their issues and their gripes, and but in the end they work it out, they grill together, they eat together. And by seeing, that's why there's the only drone in that film is in the end. That's the first time when you actually see what that garden looks like. Before, you're not never quite sure where is what house is where and what, but in the end you see where it is situated. And it's like we're in an urban place, but it's a garden where people of different backgrounds share something and actually manage to get along. Take this and put it globally. Couldn't we make it work globally? And maybe this sounds a little naive now, but I think also maybe it's time to have again some goal or some idea of how it could be, some kind of idea that we could aim at. Yes, will we all sing Kumbaya and get along tomorrow? No, of course not. I know that. But why not say, if there is an issue, maybe we could talk about it. Maybe I could say, why do you do it that way? I'm curious. Oh, okay. Well, I do it this. Could we maybe find a middle ground? Why not do that? And I think that's the point of this film, through a little story of this woman, Nelly, who at this point I'd like to also give a huge, huge, huge compliment to Steffi, because she, like you said, her first lead, and she carries that film, and that is incredible. But like Steffi said, we also had every single person in this film bring something to it, and in a way makes a little journey. If you take Franco, the president, from the beginning until the end, like you can also find a little, he changed. So, I think it's a little story that has a bigger thing behind it if you want to see that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. All right. Well, my last question is sort of personal for you both. What projects are you working on now, or what might we see from you next? Yeah.
You go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, actually, there's a film that's now streaming on PBS. So people that are, members of PBS or so can look at it. It's called American Exile. It's a documentary that took 7 years to make. And it's about the deportation of U.S. combat veterans, which people go like, wait, what? But watch the film. I mean, I'm very proud of this film. Unfortunately, again, I just talked about, can't we all get along and it's, be one big happy family. And this documentary is it's almost unbelievable, And so it's again harsh reality. It's an hour documentary. It's had its national broadcast premiere on PBS on November 16th, and now I think it's streaming until February or March. So that was the last thing, and there are always different projects flying around, and hopefully one of them takes off, and I can eventually come back with something here.
Yes, please. Steffi, how about you?
Well, I have a few auditions lined up, so there's nothing set in stone, but things are happening. Now I just have to get the parts, and then I have a lot to talk about in the next year. So I'm hoping for that. But right now I'm still in the middle of post-production of my boyfriend's master degree project from acting school, and it's an interactive theater game. It's very complex, and it's a big thing. So we're still in the middle of post-production of that, and that should be online in February, we think. So
wow.
Yeah, and that's what we're finishing right now.
Fantastic. Well, we will stay tuned for all of the projects coming from you both. And I just want to thank you again for taking the time to join us, answering the questions, and sharing the film and your stories and insights with us.
Thank you, and thank
you for having us. Yeah, and thanks to everybody that watched and will or has watched the film. And I hope the ones who will enjoy it, and the ones who have enjoyed it.
And just a reminder, it is streaming till December 21st. So you still have almost a week to watch it. So I really encourage you to do so. And then you can come back and watch the discussion and fill in some of the context around the film. But yes, on behalf of the Embassy of Switzerland, I want to thank you all so much for joining us for this month's film club, and for the film club throughout the year. We're planning right now our 2022 edition. So please stay tuned for our newsletters and our social media at Swiss Embassy USA for more information. And in the meantime, I wish you all a very happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.
All the best for 2022.
Yeah, stay healthy.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.